Hey everybody, and welcome back to the channel. Today we're taking another look at the PTS patch notes for the Elsweyr chapter. Right now we're all the way up to week 3 of the PTS. Basically the way it works is week 1 we had a lot of serious, massive changes. Week 2 was a lot smaller, little bug fixes and things like that. And then now that we're in week 3, we get to more of like the rebalancing and adjustment phase of this DLC. If you missed any of the earlier patch note reviews and you want to get kind of caught up from where we started to where we are now, I'll put a link for that in the description. For this video though, I'm going to mostly focus on the class balance changes that are coming out now in week 3, as well as a major change to gap closers in the game. So let's jump right in here to the week 3 patch notes. Alright, I am going to start off by covering the Necro changes here on the patch notes because they're pretty significant. What we're seeing now is a pretty strong rebalancing of the Necromancer class. Initially, it seemed like it was really OP, and it looks like ZeniMax is kind of realizing that this is probably not the best look for a class, and so they're rebalancing it now rather than waiting until later like they did with the Warden. So I like this approach. I think they're on the right path here. They're definitely adjusting some of the power of the Necromancer class, which initially looked like a super powerful class. So let's dive into the skill lines here. So Gravelord, fix an issue with Blast Bones, Boneyard not being increased by Ancient Knowledge. The Lightning Staff bonus. Okay, so that's actually a buff for Necromancers. That's an 8% damage buff on AoEs that they weren't getting before. So that's pretty strong. So that's going to up their damage quite a bit. But then Blast Bones itself got a bit of a tweak here, a bit of a nerf. So they reduced the health of the skeleton summoned by this ability to 7,000 from 10,000. And its leap attack now happens after 1.5 seconds rather than immediately. So the way I understand this ability, you can kind of think of it as like a subterranean assault from a Warden. Except it kind of like locks onto your target and chases after them. And it basically detonates a bomb on that target. So it's extremely powerful if you think about that Warden ability, but now you don't even have to aim it. It self-aims. It's like an auto-targeting missile. That's basically the power of the Blast Bones ability. So they did reduce the health on that. So I assume that means you can kill these a little bit easier before they get to the target. So a little bit of counterplay there will be interesting. And then it seems like it's going to chase a little bit slower. So again, more counterplay is always good, especially with super strong abilities like this. There is a passive here called Reusable Parts for this skill line, and they just adjusted that passive so that it reduces the cost of your next summoned ability by up to 25%. So that's pretty nice for a Necromancer, I would assume. Just being able to summon more and more and more with reduced cost after each one. That seems really good. All right, taking a look at our next skill line here on the Necro, we've got the Bone Tyrant skill line. Apparently there was an issue where corpses were hanging around a little bit longer than they were supposed to, so that's been fixed. They also fixed an issue with Bone Armor, where they could spawn additional corpses and charge you additional resources for casting, so that definitely sounds like a bug. Now this is interesting here with the Death Gleaning passive. The Necromancer, as far as we know, like right now, there's a lot of really strong passives for this class. A lot of really strong passives. And this was definitely one of them. You get the passive restoration, Magicka, and Stamina when an enemy dies around you. So that was previously 200 Magicka and Stamina, which is really nice. That's really good, but they did reduce it down to 100 at max rank. So it's still going to be good, just not as good. Still sounds like a great passive to me. Think about like when I'm leveling up my new Necromancer, when Elsweyr hits, this is going to be awesome because I get resource sustain for every enemy that dies around me. There's also no cooldown, which is it's going to be pretty strong for grinding for sure. So the Death Scythe, this is kind of like a spammable ability for the Necromancer. They fixed an issue with the healing, so the morph should be healing now more than the base version, so that makes sense to me. They changed the damage type here, so previously it was melee damage, and now it's going to be direct damage. And in Ruinous Scythe, I believe this is the Stamina morph. You guys can correct me in the comments if I'm wrong on that. But this initially sounded like a super powerful ability in PvP. It used to have this healing absorption, and there's not too much healing absorption in the Elder Scrolls Online. I can think of maybe like one other set that does this. So it's pretty powerful and pretty hard to get. So Apparently it was a little bit too overpowered with that on this specific morph. So now they're making it apply off balance, which this is kind of a nice change if you think about a PvE perspective. Another source of off balance is always pretty welcome. So we'll see. We'll see how this morph plays out. I think it's pretty interesting though. And then speaking about those Necro passives, you guys, this was another really strong Necro passive. It used to be you just get a flat max health bonus of 2,000 just for being a Necromancer. That's pretty insane. So they reduced that down to 1250 at max rank. So I kind of like that for balance. It does give you a nice perk for being a Necromancer without being too overpowered. So I do like that change there. And then lastly for the Necromancer, Living Death is our healing skill line. And this is the ultimate here, Reanimate. Now I know a lot of people had issues with this ultimate. The fact that you could instantly res 3 players is kind of scary, especially in PvP. Cyrodiil with larger ball groups running multiple Necromancers. So I think they realized that, and I heard them, I heard Brian and Gil talking about this on the stream on Friday. I think they realized the potential for this to be misused, let's say. And so what they did was they increased the ultimate to 350, which is probably one of the highest costing ultimates in the game right now. It does have a slight cost reduction, but it's very minimal here, 335. And then one of the morphs here, Animate, will cost 320. So I appreciate that they're still kind of tweaking this and looking at it, trying to make it a little bit less accessible. I think is a smart move, especially in PvP. It's still going to be just as useful in PvE because you'll have a dedicated person just reserving ultimate for this. So I don't see it as much of a problem there as in PvP. So I think this is a positive change overall. And then one more adjustment to the passives here. This was a stamina and magicka recovery passive. So not only did they gain magicka and stamina from one passive here, which is Death Gleaning, Necros also have a second recovery passive here called Undead Confederate, and they reduced this as well down to 200 at max rank from 300. So yep, just a little bit more balance there overall. I think that's a good approach to take right now. Remember, it is only week 3, so this can be adjusted further. We have about 2 more weeks, I believe. All right, so I want to jump down to the combat section here because there are some pretty interesting changes made to gap closers. Did not see this coming at all. This is kind of a surprise, actually. Something that the community, I think, has been complaining about for a long time, especially the PvP community in this game, is gap closers and gap closer snares. Basically, the way it has worked, and is still working now on the live server, is gap closer abilities like, let's say, Nightblade Ambush or Two-Hand Crit Rush, things like that. They will apply a snare to the target to basically slow that target down and make it easier to hit by the gap closer. I believe this was done initially when the game first launched because of, like, I don't want to say lag, but probably lag, like connectivity issues, where it would just make it easier to connect with the target if they were slower. But it gives a lot of problems to the game in general because it's not even listed like on the tooltip for the ability, and it kind of, you can, spam it on a target. You can spam a gap closer and then they're like infinitely snared. You can do this on a Nightblade, for example, by spamming Ambush. So when they started talking about this on the stream on last Friday, I was really surprised. It seems like they really have wanted to get rid of this functionality, and they finally did here on PTS 3. So they removed the snare applied from all abilities that deal with charges, leaps, teleports, basically gap closers. They also removed the minimum range from these abilities. So some of these do have a minimum range. I want to say Crit Rush, I want to say Shield Charge, where like if you're close to a target, you can't actually activate the ability because you're too close, which is weird because it wasn't for all gap closers, only for certain ones. So now there's no minimum range, so I definitely like that. What they did here, since there's no snare, is they increased the speed drastically. I wonder even what that looks like. Okay, so this is pretty vague, I want to say. Like, they don't give any examples, really. So we'll have to kind of wait and see how this plays out in gap closer abilities, but I like the change overall. I think they're going in the right direction here. Note here that Dragon Leap still has a snare. It's actually going to get a unique visual. Some kind of like dust effect on the ground, maybe, or on your character, so that there's still some kind of counterplay. And they also increase the speed of Dragon Leap, but not as dramatically. So that's going to be awesome on the StamDK. That's going to be fun to see for sure. Okay, let's check out class ability changes next. We already talked about the Necro, which is new. And now taking a look at our older classes. So the Dragon Knight changes. So under Draconic Power, we've got Dragonfire Scales. This is our damaging morph. They fixed an issue where it could not critically strike. So it sounds like you'll be getting more damage overall out of that. Also here, 2 or more Dragon Knights cannot self-perpetuate the damage and return between them with this ability. So I guess that means kind of reflecting the projectile back and forth. You can't do that, apparently. All right, Nightblades, I know this is where most of people's focus has been with the Elsweyr chapter. Tons and tons of changes to the Nightblade class. Almost a complete rework of the class. So let's see here. Assassination, we've got Grim Focus. So this skill has gone through many changes. It lost Minor Berserk. It lost Minor Endurance for Stamina Nightblades. It gained healing after 5 light attacks, but nothing else, basically. And so, yeah, the changes were not great. And this is kind of what they did, which is unexpected. It's different for sure. So this ability and the morphs will now reduce your damage taken by 3% for each light or heavy attack, stacking up to 5 times. The bonus will persist even if Grim Focus fades, as it's tethered to you and the amount of stacks you have. And you lose the effect, that extra damage reduction, when you use the bow, when you fire the spectral bow, or when you leave combat. So 3%, 5 stacks, that's a 15% damage reduction. Now, it's most likely not additive. It's not going to just add on top of things like minor protection, major protection. So I don't think it's quite as powerful as it sounds, but it's definitely a strong buff. The question is that I have, and I know a lot of Nightblades have, is why this? Why does this even fit like the style of the Nightblade class? I'm not sure it does, but let's see what the comment says here. So the goal was to alleviate some of the pains brought up where it had a cost and a global cooldown to activate, but it was basically a mini game before you were able to get any reward. And that was unlike any other skill in the game. So that's definitely true. A lot of people on the ESO forums commented about that, where, why am I casting this skill for nothing? I have to do 5 light attacks before I get anything and then just a little heal. That's not great, especially in PvP where the healing is already reduced. So adding something to each light attack is definitely an improvement here. Let's see. The initial intent was to remove the overloaded nature of this ability, where it granted you passive damage, which is the Minor Berserk, but also granted you burst damage. So that's pretty much it, you guys. That's the goal that they had, and I think that's interesting that they finally kind of spelled it out. Okay, whatever. Now the focus can fit with multiple playstyles and can be used by tanks, damage dealers, or even healers. So I don't know. It's an interesting change. It's definitely different. It's a reworking of the skill completely. What do you guys think? I mean, do you think this is going to be useful for the majority of builds? It definitely seems like for tanky builds in PvP, like for brawler style, this is going to make them even stronger. Now here's another change that's pretty interesting. Mark Target, they removed the cost from this ability and its morphs. This was done to make it more similar to Weakness to Elements. This has positive and negative. So my main comment with this is, okay, they removed Major Fracture from Surprise Attack. That's because Mark Target also has Fracture. They want us to use Mark Target. Fine. My problem with that, with the first patch, Week 1 PTS, was that this costs a lot of magicka to cast Mark Target on a Stamina Nightblade build that's not going to be sustainable for multiple targets. And so the fact that they remove the cost completely helps that 100% helps that and makes it viable. Now, I think the problem that I have with this is I don't know if they thought about Stamina Nightblades using this against other Nightblades or against Magicka Nightblades, where Cloak is still going to be like one of their primary defenses. And now any Stamina Nightblade can cast this for free and reveal another Nightblade. I believe you can only reveal one target at a time, so there is some limits there, but still, there's basically no downside to slotting this and trolling other Nightblade builds. Maybe the reveal morph should cost Magicka. Fixed an issue with Storm Calling, just another bug fix here. For Sorcerers, Restoring Aura, so this was probably a nice buff actually. They reduced the cost of this as well. Again, making it similar to Weakness to Elements, which is free, okay. And then just a couple of weapon skill line changes, so Whirlwind got a change here. So it used to be you could get some bonus execute damage at 100% and below, and now they reduced the threshold to 50% because it is execute damage, so that makes sense. Basically, I guess there are people who are using this as a spammable attack on certain builds, so they're going to change that because it's AoE. Okay. And then Rapid Fire, the Ballista Morph, could cause health desyncs under certain circumstances. They fixed the health desyncs. Okay. Did they fix it with Snipe, I wonder? We'll see. All right, guys, so I'm going to end it there for this patch note review for week 3, covering most of the major class changes. We looked at Necro. We looked at the other classes, mostly Nightblades with Grim Focus and Mark Target. If you guys liked this video or you found it at all informative to you, please remember to drop a like. Leave a comment. Let me know what you think overall about Necromancer changes, Nightblade changes. As always, don't forget to subscribe to the channel for lots more Elsweyr updates as well as build videos. I do create those every week on the channel, you guys, so make sure you check it out. And until then, I'll see you around in the next video. Thanks.